So how do we manage change and uncertainties? And really, at a fundamental level, when we hear things like, life is impermanent or the only constant is change in life, we all go, yeah, we know this, right? And yet, when it happens to us, we really only know it sort of superficially, because when we're thrown into that midst of changes that we are not expecting, or when we have uncertainties in our life, say for some of us, maybe all of a sudden we get quite sick, or even for some of us who had the unfortunate experience of long COVID, in the back of your mind, you're wondering, when am I going to recover? Or if we lose our jobs or marriage break up, can we ever be happy alone again? So there's all these uncertainties that often show up in our lives. And when we encounter these sort of challenges, we can become really nervous, fearful, anxious about it all. And it's because we're not programmed. We haven't been conditioned to become comfortable with not knowing. Our social conditioning, for most of us, our upbringing, is all about getting control into our lives, being able to control things in our life. And yet, when we actually reflect on it, there's so much about us that we can't control. Even our body, we think we can control what we eat and how we want to look. And again, that's all very superficial, because we can't even really control our digestive system, or we can't really stop our heart from beating, really. It's all happening inside of us, right? And in fact, 2,500 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama, who became the enlightened one, Buddha, already worked all this out. And, for many of us here who are aware of his teachings, he talked about impermanence. And of course, his Four Noble Truths is about the fact that life is full of suffering. That's the first noble truth. And the second noble truth is that the reason why we suffer is not because of the situations we find ourselves in, but it's really because of our attachments. And of course, the attachments are attachments of our thoughts, our beliefs, our material things, our body, what we identify with as our jobs, the people that we love. We want to control them. We want them to see the things the same way we see things, for example. And the third noble truth is that actually we can be released from our suffering. And to be released from our suffering, so basically he's given us some solutions. He says, you can follow these eightfold paths. And he basically categorized the eightfold paths into three categories. Ethical conduct, meaning have the right speech, the right action, the right livelihood. Your livelihood is going around killing people, then chances are you're not going to sleep well at night, and therefore you suffer. So having that right livelihood, whatever it is, if it's something that is doing good for our society, we feel good, less suffering. Mental discipline, having the right effort, the right mindfulness, which is what this session intends to do, and the right concentration. And then he talks about wisdom, which is the last two paths, which is right thought and right understanding. I read once that the story goes that with Buddha's disciple, he saw an very old bent man walking down the road, and he was with his disciples, and he told his disciples, look at that man. And of course the disciples looked and they said, why? And he said, well, do you not think that this may be you one day? And that in itself is his way of teaching that you're never going to stay the same forever. We're all at some point are going to get sick, get old. People we love, we may leave them first, or they may leave us first. So his idea is, his basic fundamental teaching is really about becoming aware of what we're attached to. And so coming back to managing change and uncertainties, the first realization is this acknowledgement. Giving you a quote here, he says, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this wisdom, one turns away from suffering. So the wisdom is that to really get into our head and live with this notion that uncertainties and impermanence is really very much part and parcel of our life. But what does this mean in our day-to-day living? Well, when things are going well, we don't take it for granted. We savor them. We experience them fully, knowing very well that they may end at some point. And when things don't go well, we too be very aware of the fact that we can go through and ride this experience like riding the curves of a wave in an ocean in a way that we know that this too shall pass, right? And in fact, in one of his quotes, he says that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So what that means is that we don't resist. We don't resist even the unpleasant things that come into our lives, because the more we resist, the more it persists and the more suffering we encounter. So it's really part of his teaching and something that I've been really trying to live my own way, is to really get comfortable with not knowing. Here's another quote from Epictetus, a Greek Stoic philosopher, who says that nothing is in reality either pleasant or unpleasant by nature, but all things become so through habit. And so we can make it into a habit of not knowing. And in that sense, it's worthwhile for all of us to, from time to time, also contemplate this idea of, what are we really attached to? How attached are we to our status in society? And almost allow ourselves to imagine what happens when it's gone. What happens when this notion of us being this person in society or in your community is gone? Could we live with that? Could we thrive through that? And certainly for me, many of you would have heard my divorce story. I didn't realize how much I identified with this, this role of being a wife and this idea of growing old with someone, and suddenly when that was gone, I suffered a lot. But then it's through this suffering that I've really learned a lot as well and grown a lot. And so reflecting on how much we become so attached to our body, to our job, and to practice this idea that they could be gone, but deep down we have something still deeper and stronger within us that we have, that we can lean on. And this mindfulness practice is what helps us tap into that. My teacher, Jack Confield, likes to say, don't hold on anything too tightly because you're going to get rope burn, which I thought is really funny. So, and reflect on how strongly you're holding on to relationships or your beliefs and your values. And by holding on, especially with those, are they impacting you in another way? So part of all this is really about building resilience in us, because as we know, things can change, and it's wise to prepare ourselves for when times change. And that means it's really about coming back to what we hold on to tightly. But when we're in that midst of change, then what we can do is to stay present and keep coming to the present moment, because our mind likes to take us to some dark places, when things are uncertain, and tell us that the worst things that can happen. And most of that are fake news, right? So that right mindfulness is about coming back to the present moment and not worrying about the past or the future, but being here, right now. I just want to very quickly tell you another story that really kind of points to what we're talking about today. And it's a very short story by Leo Tolstoy, I think is how you pronounce it. So the story goes, I'll be very quick because I want to give you a nice long meditation as well, is that once upon a time there was this king who wanted 3 questions answered, and he wanted to know what's the right time to begin everything. And if he knew who were the right people to listen to, and who to avoid, and above all, if he always knew what was the most important thing to do, then he would never fail, because he would never make mistakes. So those were his 3 questions. And he, of course, he consulted his councils and his knights, and they all gave all the different answers, and he didn't like any of them. And then someone said to him, well, there's a hermit in the countryside. He's meant to be very wise, and maybe you could ask him. So he did. He went to the wood and he found the hermit, but the king was dressed in common people's clothes, simple clothes. And he saw that the hermit was working, digging and plowing the land. And so he went up to the hermit and asked those 3 questions. What's the right time to do anything, and who is the right person to listen to, and what's the most important thing to do so that you never fail. And the hermit basically ignored him and kept plowing. And the king looked at the hermit and thought, gee, he looks really old and tired, and said to the hermit, let me help you. I'll do the plowing for you. So he did for quite some time. And as he was doing that, a man ran up to them, and he was all bloody. He was obviously very injured. And the king and the hermit helped the man. And next morning, the man woke up and was feeling better. And he said, oh dear Lord King, I'm so grateful to you, and you must forgive me, because I was actually here to kill you. I was following you, and your man saw me, and actually then we had a fight. You took away our land and killed my brother or something like that. And the king said, look, I didn't, I apologize. It's all good. In fact, I will give you back your land. And then basically that all happened. And then he went back to the hermit and said, you still haven't answered those 3 questions. And the hermit basically said, well, you already know the answer, because when you showed up and helped me, you did it at the right time. And if you didn't help me, you would have been killed by the man, because you would have left. If I didn't answer your question and you left, you would have met this man and would have been killed. And so the most important time is when you were digging the beds, and I was the most important man at the time, and you did me good. And also afterwards, when the man ran up to us, that was the most important time, when you attended to him. And if you did not bound his wounds, he would have died, which would have left you without any peace. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was the most important business. So in summary then, the one most important time is now. It is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. And the most necessary person is the one with whom you are with. For no one knows whether he will ever have dealings with anyone else. And the most important affair is to do that person good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into this life. So that was the story. All right. So I've talked a lot today, but I felt like there was much to share, because things like changes and uncertainties show up in our life all the time. So I hope that was useful. So let's begin with our meditation. So sit in a way that you're comfortable sitting. As always, close your eyes and take a moment to take some deep breaths. So breathing in and really slowing down the out breath. And with each out breath, making it long and slow, and almost imagining that your out breath can be like a waterfall, washing away all your stresses, all the things that's built up throughout the week. And you're just allowing them to leave your body. Now just breathe naturally. And just see where you can sense your breath. for the next few moments, using your breath as an anchor to help you stay present to the here and now. So following your breath in and out wherever you sense it. You can become curious with your breath, as if you're sensing each breath for the first time. And so you can follow your breath, the beginning of your in-breath, the middle of your in-breath, the end of your in-breath, and notice at which point it becomes the out-breath. This is helping us cultivate that right mindfulness, the right concentration. Perfectly normal for the mind to wander off. As soon as you become aware of the fact that the mind has wandered off, you might wish to acknowledge that thought, label it, thinking, remembering, worrying, and then bring your attention back to the breath. You may even begin to sense there's more of a stillness within you now, and the body is more relaxed. And that sensing is that awareness that is within all of us, that is often overshadowed by the thinking mind. And this awareness is what we're trying to cultivate to help us stay steady and calm in the midst of changes and uncertainties. And so there's a knowing within us. When you're breathing in, you know you're breathing in. When you're breathing out, you know you're breathing out. I'd like you now to bring your attention towards your heart space and see if you could send your breath into that heart space to allow space in the heart. And I'm going to read you these gratitude phrases. So begin by just feeling how you have cared for yourself in your own life. And as I say these phrases, see if you could sense your appreciation and your gratitude in your heart space. With gratitude, I remember the people, animals, plants, insects, creatures of the sky and sea, air and water, fire and earth, all whose joyful exertion blesses my life every day. With gratitude, I remember the care and labor of 1,000 generations of elders and ancestors who came before me. I offer my gratitude for the blessing of this earth I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the measure of health I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the family and friends I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the community I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the teachings and lessons I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the life I have been given. And just as we are grateful for our blessings, so we can be grateful for the blessings of others. As you become aware of your sense of space within you, the gratitude in your heart, I will guide you out of this practice with the sound of 3 bells.